From Cherry Hill Publishing. Connected by Simon Denman. Read by the author. Wandering into Martin's den, he felt a shiver run down his spine. The place was still a mess. Imagining Isabel had found it too upsetting to tidy, he made a mental note to sort through it for her. As he looked around, he was searching for an explanation. Why does an apparently happy and successful man kill himself? To one side of the desk stood an electric keyboard and synthesizer, the floor around which was littered with music scores and haphazard piles of books. Books on music, art, poetry, philosophy, theology, and also a few which surprised him: chaos, consciousness, neural networks, complexity, and so on. Peter leafed through a few, their margins full of his brother's illegible scribbling. Since when had Martin been into trendy science? Or science at all, for that matter? Martin had always maintained that science killed the beauty and mystery of the natural world. It was one of the recurring arguments they had enjoyed together. For Peter, nature's beauty could only be enhanced through better understanding. Around the computer were hundreds of papers, mostly printouts from the internet, with a few drawings and handwritten notes. Pinned to the wall was an arresting sequence of colour images he immediately recognised as fractals from his studies into nonlinear dynamics at Cambridge. These complex and strangely beautiful patterns, arising from quite deceptively simple mathematical equations called Mandelbrot sets, had the fascinating property of self-similarity at every scale. This meant that no matter how far you zoomed in on any one part of the image, the same overall pattern was repeated indefinitely. An intriguing consequence of this was infinitely long boundaries contained within a finite area. Fascinating concept, but not terribly useful, he thought to himself. What had Martin been up to? He remembered one of the last phone calls again. "I know everything," Martin had exclaimed enigmatically with almost equal emphasis on each syllable. The line had gone dead before further elaboration, and Peter had shrugged it off as a passing moment of his brother's weirdness. But the more he thought about it, this was what had been niggling at the back of his mind. Was it an accusation, as in, "I know about you and Isabel"? Peter was very fond of Isabel, and over the years he had begun to imagine that under different circumstances it might have become more. Perhaps these feelings were mutual, but even if that were true, neither of them had dared express it in anything more than the occasional hug or handshake lasting just a moment too long, or the knowing glances as eye contact was made across crowded rooms. Had Martin noticed such an exchange and jumped to false conclusions? The more he thought about it, the less likely it seemed. Peter was devoted to his family, and his brother had known this. But then what had Martin meant with "I know everything"? Did he seriously think that after reading a few pop scientific paperbacks, the sum of all knowledge had become his? No, Martin was too much of an intellectual for that.